What comes into your mind when you hear of a burial? I know you might have a long list. Well, I believe you didn't miss a coffin, or a casket, or body wrapping or cremation in your list. But have you ever thought of a completely different place to place the body? A car, yes, inside your favorite car. There are some people who chose to be placed in their cars before being buried. I mean to be buried inside their dear rides. Today we cover some of the people who chose to spend or at least their bodies to be placed in their, mostly expensive cars. Let's begin. Number 1. Sandra Eileen West. Being buried in a car is one thing, but being buried in a supercar is a whole new level. Sandra won't go for anything less. Sandra, a Hollywood socialite as well as former wife of a multimillionaire Texas oil baron, was buried in a Ferrari. She had wrecked her Ferrari 250 GTE in 1977, and sustained injuries that indirectly lead to her death in an overdose of prescription pain pills. She died at the age of 37. In her will, Sandra said that she should be buried in one of her Ferraris, Italian luxury car, and wearing her nightgown, negligee in the front seat. Sandra's wish was fulfilled. The burial caught the attention of many, where hundreds came to witness the unique send-off. The debate that surrounds her burial is not about whether she was really buried in a Ferrari but which one of her several. However, some credible sources claim that it was her 330 America. She was laid to rest in her baby blue 1964 Ferrari 330 America. Ferrari built only 50 units of the 330 America. She must be resting in ultimate comfort. Her grave became a tourist attraction. It is situated at the Alamo Masonic Cemetery in San Antonio. Number 2. Aurora Shuck. 16 gravesites, one woman in a Cadillac. Shuck was buried in her 1976 Cadillac Fleetwood Eldorado 1. Aurora Shuck was laid to rest in her 1976 Cadillac Eldorado convertible in 1989. Well, a unique burial comes at an extra cost, at least for this case. It required 16 gravesites to fit all of the cars into the ground. She had told her husband of her Cadillac dream 10 years before her demise. To make her wife's dream a reality, he purchased 14 neighboring plots at their local cemetery. According to Terry Adams, the superintendent of the cemetery board did approve the unusual burial. However, this is not to mean that the process was an easy one. They required a construction company to dig a grave big enough for the vehicle. To place the car into the vault, a crane was used to lift the car. The vault measured 27 feet by 12 feet and was 6 feet deep. Also, important to note is that those were the last year GM would produce a convertible, ever. Number 3. Lonnie Holloway. Holloway was buried in his 1973 Pontiac Catalina. Well, if style mattered to the dead, Holloway was not messing around. He was buried while behind the wheel of his prize green Pontiac Catalina. That was not enough, he had a company in his car, he had a passenger. Holloway had packed his guns collection in the passenger seat of the Catalina. At least he didn't leave all his possessions to be enjoyed by others who didn't labor for it. Number 4. A Chinese man. A Chinese buried in a hatchback. Asia is not left out when it comes to burying the dead inside their cars. The man was laid to rest in China's Shaanxi province inside his hatchback. The burial process was not an easy undertaking. A team worked together to haul the car inside an underground crypt. The way the whole process went showed that the dead was a respected man who chose a different resting place, a hatchback. Number 5. Willie the Wimp, Stokes. Yes, Stokes was not technically laid to rest in his ride, but he was taken to his resting place in a custom coffin shaped in the form of a Cadillac Seville. He was a gambler and well-known gangster. Stokes was killed in Chicago, Illinois, in 1984. His casket comprised a caddy grill, tiny windshield, lights, as well as fake wheels with whitewall tires. Stokes was seated behind the wheel, wearing a huge diamond and holding $100 bills. The burial, particularly the casket, caught the attention of many, including media. Even music was composed regarding the unique funeral. Bill Carter and Ruth Ellsworth composed the song, and recorded it in 1985. Its cover was released later by Stevie Ray Vaughan. Number 6. Chaked Button Pitso. Pitso was buried inside his Mercedes-Benz 500. Pitso, a South African politician, was laid to rest inside his Mercedes-Benz 500 Classic Museum Begeerter 01. He died in the year 2020 and got buried with his second-hand 1990s Mercedes-Benz E500. Although Pizzo had gone through a rough time of losing much of his wealth, he could not give up on his love for Mercedes-Benz. Consequently, he spent the money that he had to buy a used E500. He could often sit inside his Mercedes-Benz and enjoy music even when it broken down and couldn't be driven. It is said that, doing so was his favorite thing. It is during all this that his family came to know about his desire to be laid to rest in his car when would pass on. When he passed on, Pizzo was seated behind the wheel with hands on the steering wheel. Also, he was clothed in a white suit and shirt. His posture seemed like of one driving the vehicle, with seat belt on. Number 7. George Swanson. Swanson was buried in a Corvette. Swanson had his ashes buried in his 1984 Corvette. He was buried in a suburb of Pittsburgh in 1994. It is also important to cover other people who chose to be buried in or on different mobility aids. They include Billy Stanley. Billy was buried seated on a Harley-Davidson. The burial of Billy Stanley was a unique one in its own way. While those whom we have already covered were buried in cars, Stanley was buried on a motorcycle in Mechanicsburg, Ohio. The idea did come abruptly, but it was well though while he was still alive. Stanley was not compromising on going to the grave on his 1967 Harley-Davidson. His family worked while he was still living to see how his wish could be fulfilled. They came up with the idea of modifying a cement septic tank to achieve his desire. Also, it required a bigger burial site, so they ended up acquiring 3 burial plots. Stanley took his last ride by arriving to the cemetery on his bike. A truck towed the bike. Secondly, the Australian man. The Australian was buried with his Harley-Davidson. The man was buried with his Fatboy 2018 Beast 4D. He was member of the Hunters Motorcycle Club. His one request was that he be laid to rest with his prized Harley-Davidson Fatboy motorcycle when he pass on. Australian law didn't allow people to be buried with any type of car because of petrol and oils. As a result, they had to do away with those, and thus were able to bypass that restriction. Thirdly, a man posed on motorcycle. This occurrence also deserves to be covered. Although the dead was not laid to rest on his motorcycle, the man was positioned on his motorcycle during the body viewing. This burial took place in Puerto Rico, where the man had died in a shooting. It seems that the bike was so dear to the man, such that he had to be sat on it during his last day. These car burials news have also aroused debates regarding their credibility. Therefore, it is important to note some burials that have been proved to have not been true. For instance, the Nigerian man. In 2018, the social media was flooded with news about a son who buried his father in a BMW. The son had bought the car specifically for the burial, and the pictures of the burial were circulating on the media. Although the pictures were real, the reality was different. The pictures were shot while filming a scene for a movie titled Social Club. Another example is of a Brazilian tycoon. The wealthy Brazilian is seen burying his Bentley as he prepared for his last day on Earth. There were debates on social media surrounding the time and day of the vehicle burial in Sao Paulo. Yes, the press, and the curious, turned up. The man even posed beside the car with a shovel. However, it turned out to be a publicity stunt to encourage organ donations. They wanted to pass the message that it is wrong to be buried with organs that can help the living who are in need, and therefore it is important for everyone to be of help to those in need of organs, even in their death. What a way to end this video. I hope you have also been inspired to be a donor. I believe you have enjoyed the video to the end. Therefore, do not forget to subscribe, if you haven't, to like, comment, and share. Have a good time till we meet in the next video.